Most of us think of loneliness as something we're trying to escape, a place no one plans to live in for very long. But that raises a strange question. If that's true, why do some people slowly become better at being alone, while finding connection increasingly difficult? It's not because they stopped wanting it, but because somewhere along the way, loneliness stopped feeling temporary. It became familiar, predictable, a place where they knew how to function. And that creates a quiet contradiction. The very thing they say they want to leave begins to feel safer than the connection they're trying to find. And perhaps that's why loneliness can become so difficult to walk away from. Not because another life seems impossible, but because after enough time, the unknown begins to feel more frightening than the emptiness we've quietly grown used to. Most people imagine loneliness as something that arrives all at once. A difficult season, a chapter they're trying to get through. But that's rarely how it stays. Like almost everything else we experience repeatedly, it begins to develop a rhythm. The evenings become easier to predict. The silence asks fewer questions. The empty spaces stop feeling unusual. We begin building a life that's designed around no one else being there. We learn how to fill weekends, how to eat alone, how to make plans that never depend on another person. None of those things seem remarkable on their own, until one day you realize they no longer feel like adjustments. They simply feel like the way life works. And that's when you stop feeling like someone enduring loneliness. You feel like someone who's become comfortable with it. The strange thing about familiarity is that it quietly changes more than our routines. It changes what begins to feel safe, not because the familiar is always better, but because little by little, it stops asking us to make sense of it. We stop having to explain it, question it, prepare ourselves for it. And after a while, certainty begins to matter more than possibility. That's when familiarity starts changing the way we measure risk. At first, loneliness feels like the thing we're trying to escape. But over time, it becomes the one place where we already know the rules. We know what tomorrow will feel like. We know what the day will ask of us. Even the silence becomes predictable. Connection offers something loneliness cannot, but it also asks us to step into a world we can no longer anticipate, where expectations can be misunderstood, where closeness can disappear, where another person can change the shape of our days in ways we can't control. And that's the quiet shift. Loneliness is no longer the safest place. It's simply the most familiar one. Perhaps that's why so many of us keep searching for language before we search for answers. If these conversations resonate with you, consider subscribing. There's a new reflection here every Sunday. Maybe that's the part we rarely notice. We spend so much time learning how to live with loneliness that we stop waiting for it to leave, not because we decided to stay, but because over time, that empty space stops feeling temporary. It simply starts feeling like life. And once something starts feeling like life, changing it no longer means simply finding company. It means disturbing a way of living that has quietly become familiar. Every way of living asks something of us, even the ones we never intended to keep. The longer we remain inside a familiar life, the more that life begins to shape what feels possible. We stop imagining different routines, different endings to our days. Any kind of change becomes less imaginable. Not because it isn't possible, but because we've stopped expecting it. And that's the quiet cost of becoming too comfortable with any life. It doesn't close the door. It simply makes us stop reaching for the handle. Little by little, our world doesn't become emptier. It becomes smaller. And perhaps that's the quiet lesson hidden beneath loneliness. This was never only about being alone. It's about the remarkable way human beings adapt. We adjust to places we never imagined staying. We learn the rules of lives we never meant to keep. And given enough time, even the unfamiliar can begin to feel like home. Perhaps that's why letting go of anything familiar can feel so difficult. Not because it was something we wanted, but because it's the life we've quietly grown into. Perhaps that's what adaptation looks like. Not learning to love where we are, simply staying there long enough that anywhere else begins to feel harder to imagine.